The $1,000 that you were making in high school, what were you doing?
I started building websites for people, and before I knew it, it was selling $1,000 a day. I'd never had a boss in my entire life. My goal was once I am earning $1,000 a day, that was my goal. I don't have to go to high school anymore and I can drop out.
What's your current net worth, liquid and illiquid?
It's well into the eight figures. The vast majority of it is liquid in stocks. There was a moment, I think, after Mutual Mobile where I realized I didn't need to work again. And I kind of tried not working. And I realized I just loved building too much.
Today's guest is John Arrow, who bootstrapped his company to 350 people and sold for $100 million. $70 million of that went to his personal bank account. He has his own plane that he flies wherever he wants, and he has a house in New York and in Austin, where he flies himself back and forth whenever he wants. This episode is awesome. This is a very interesting guest. I hope you enjoy. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of MoneyWise. Today, I have John Arrow with me. Appreciate you joining MoneyWise today, John.
Hey, Daniel. Great to be here.
Awesome. It sounds like you're in New York today. You're usually in Austin, though. Tell me what takes you to New York.
I split my time between Austin and New York. I think those two cities pair incredibly well together, and it looked like in New York we had some better weather today.
But you told me right before this, it's going to be like hotter in New York today than it is in Austin?
I like the heat. I'm one of those people that doesn't complain about the hot months in Austin. It's perfect
funny.
right here in New York. They pair so well together. I think this could be a second Austin, maybe if we figure out the mayor situation here.
I'm in Charleston, and I love the heat until it gets really hot. In Charleston, I try to go anywhere else but Charleston in July and August. It's terrible, terrible weather. But look, I'm excited to talk a little bit about who you are today, what brings you to MoneyWise. If you could tell us kind of a little bit about yourself, and I know you've started a number of companies and businesses. Tell us what makes you kind of a good guest to bring on the show.
I'm a lifelong entrepreneur. I connected with Sam several years back. And one of those things is I'd never had a boss in my entire life. I remember growing up and I was that kid, that annoying kid who would knock on your door trying to sell you different things. When he was 7 or 8 years old, I would always have the lemonade stand out at every street corner in the hot Texas summers. In the winter, it does get cold there in Austin. We have 1 month that gets down in the 50s. I would be selling hot chocolate. And so I learned at a really early age that if you were resourceful and you had grit and you tried to do things, you could make money. Then in high school, I started a software business, and I wasn't really a big fan of going to public high school. It kind of made me not want a 9-to-5 job. So I dedicated myself, and my goal was, look, once I am earning $1,000 a day, that was my goal. I don't have to go to high school anymore and I can drop out. Well, I eventually hit that goal. My parents said, no, you're not dropping out of high school. And I was on the fence about whether I was going to go to college or not. I'm so glad I did, because it allowed me to really scale my business faster by meeting other like-minded people at the University of Texas that I was able to build ventures with. And it just goes to show you that just because you don't need to do something doesn't mean you shouldn't do it.
The $1,000 that you were making in high school, what were you doing?
So originally I started building websites for people. This was back in the day of GeoCities, where everybody needed to be a .com company, like everybody needs to be a AI company today. And I realized I had this slight advantage that I knew how to make these things really, really well. Or at least I thought that they were well. Looking back, they probably weren't that great. I mean, if you're serious about your business, you shouldn't hire a 14 or 15-year-old to make your websites. But I was able to do that so that I generated some initial capital where it allowed me to kind of look at the space separately. And I realized I could make a software product to basically help parents monitor what their kids were doing online. My mom, growing up, she was a psychotherapist. And so she told me these stories about parents really not understanding AOL Instant Messenger and all of these platforms, and their kids would get into trouble talking to strangers. I realized, oh, wait, I know how to help prevent this. So I made a piece of software that did exactly that and put it out there, had a PayPal buy now button. And before I knew it, it was selling $1,000 a day, every day.
Wow.
And so I continued scaling that. Eventually, when I got into college, I saw what was going to be happening with mobile, and I shifted all my focus to that, which we can get into.
Yeah, and you mentioned .com. Tell me more about how growing up in the .com era, and I don't know if we want to call it a bubble, but that period of time, how did that shape the way that you thought about growing businesses and making money?
I was extremely fortunate that I got to grow up in two of the .com epicenters. First, I was living in Seattle for a while. My dad worked at Microsoft, and so I got to see everything that was happening there. Then we moved to Austin, which was really ground zero for everything that was interesting happening on the web, at least in my view. And I was trying to make sense of it all as a young teenager at the time. I was thinking, okay, wait, why are all these companies worth so much? All of a sudden, all I can see that they're doing is throwing elaborate parties and spending a bunch of money. So the way I reconciled it after the bust is that no, they weren't actually doing anything that useful. They were convincing other people that they were. And that was an extreme cautionary tale for me, where I realized you didn't need to go out and create this perception that you were generating value. Just go generate value. That's what led to the software company. I said, how can I just get people to buy things? I don't want to have investors. I don't want to have a boss telling me what to do. I just want to start making more money every day than I did the day before it.
I love that. That's very cool. I reached out to one of your buddies, Neville, before the episode, asked him, hey, I'm having John Arrow on MoneyWise, and I want to kind of hear some of the behind the scenes of John Arrow, of what makes him tick, of the history that you guys have together. So I have a couple clips. I'm going to share one right now, but I would love to hear your thoughts on it.
John is just an interesting guy. He hang glides. He has always flown planes. I remember he would never really drink all that much. And I asked him one time, why don't you really drink? And he's just like, honestly, if I drink, I can't fly within 12 hours or 24 hours. So I always want to be prepared to fly. Like, that's the kind of guy John is. He has a bunch of eccentricities, like he'll walk around downtown, but only with earplugs, because he wants to save his hearing for when he's old.
Obviously, Neville probably has a lot of history with you, and it sounds like it was cool. I asked him, I was like, hey, tell me about John. I'm having him on MoneyWise. And he sent me a 7.5-minute voice note off the cuff of all the awesome details and eccentricities of who you are, kind of what makes you interesting. And I'm really excited to dig into some of those. I even told him, might as well just upload this voice note as a podcast, because that's how good it was. But tell me more about planes and flying and some of that he just divulged around drinking and wearing earplugs. How does all that fit into who John Arrow is?
Well, first of all, Neville is such a great guy. I mean, it just speaks to the serendipity of Austin, that you find your people in these types of places, right? I mean, there's a saying that San Francisco might be the best place to start a company, but Austin's the easiest place, because you meet incredible people that are helpful, like Neville. I've known Neville almost longer than anybody else in Austin. I immediately connected with him over the entrepreneur aspect of it. And I don't know of another city where there's that same gravity where you find those people. And so one of the things is, once you find somebody like Neville, they get to learn what makes you unique pretty quick. And I think I was a freshman at UT, and I was really into flying airplanes. I had just gotten my pilot's license. I still try to fly regularly today. I'm really, really into it. And that was exactly right. It's like, okay, I have this optionality where if I take a sip of alcohol, unlike driving, it's not about blood alcohol level. It's literally one sip of alcohol. You have to wait 8 hours. And then technically it needs to be below 0.04. But if you were above 0.04 after 8 hours, you were going probably too hard to begin with. And I love that optionality. I kind of approach, life in that way too. It's like, why should you close doors unnecessarily? I mean, there's times to doing it. There is a real cost to options, just like there are derivatives. But that was just something that I love so much. One of the things Neville knows about me too is that I want to try to live as long as I possibly can, ideally forever. I'm really into the whole longevity camp. Hearing is a thing that we haven't figured out how to preserve and to protect. So I'm really cautious of that. I'm around airplanes and I'm around guns. And if you live in Austin part of the year, you're in the live music capital of the world. So there's a lot of loud things going on. It also breaks your concentration, your flow state. I get so many of my ideas. I get so much done while I'm walking. I don't want to be distracted by it. I used to wear the earplugs. Now I wear the AirPods, which are a lot, I think, more socially acceptable to wear too, rather than earplugs. And I think it's a game changer. I think it's the best product that Apple's ever made.
Yeah, I walk around with AirPods too. Are you listening to anything, or is it just noise or just nothing?
I love podcasts, and I listen to this podcast, listen to other podcasts that I like. But generally, I start out just with silence and trying to block out as much of the world as I can, and taking it through visual stimuli rather than auditory.
Yeah, I find sometimes when I'm looking for deep work, I have another pair of headphones, Bose Quiet Comfort, and I'll put those on and I'll turn on the noise canceling, and an hour and a half goes by and I realize I haven't been listening to anything but just the fuzzy noise canceling sound. I'm like, oh, that was actually kind of nice, listening to nothing for a couple hours.
It's rare these days, right? To be able to just be with your brain and not be bombarded by something.
Yes. Now I want to listen to another clip from Neville. There's a few. They're all good. They're juicy. So here comes another one.
You can ask him about what they did for my 30th birthday party. They were about to sign their company and make a life-changing amount of money. And it happened to be my 30th birthday party, a decade back. And him and his co-founder, Mickey, went to Cuba with me illegally, and 6 guys. And we couldn't communicate with the outside world. And they had to leave 2 days early, the party. We're going to be there for a week. They had to leave after a few days to go sign their company away. And they went to this foreign country where they couldn't communicate with anyone. We didn't even know if they were alive when they went back. He created the subscription process company.
Okay, so we'll get to the subscription process company in a few minutes, but you gotta tell me and the listeners more about this 30th birthday party, because Neville just barely explained it, and I was like, wait a second, I need a whole episode on this.
Neville is somebody who makes the most of every single experience. He will just basically want to live it up as much as possible. Like every moment, you've probably heard about, he wears like a death clock to know how much time he has left. And so naturally, you're turning 30, you have this milestone. He says, what's the most difficult, what's the most illegal country to go to? Decides he wants to go to Cuba. And I didn't really know much about Cuba other than that we weren't supposed to go at the time. When he asked me, I'm like, absolutely, let's do that. And so we literally couldn't buy tickets from the United States. And I was not going to fly my plane to a communist country. We ended up in Cancun. We bought in cash, which I don't care, how much you fly. Nobody's ever buys a plane ticket in like cash, like literal money. And it's the most suspicious thing ever. We went to Air Cubano. They give us these tickets. They give us something supposedly that's a visa to be there. We get on the plane. We're completely segregated between the Cubans and basically the Americans that aren't supposed to go there. We're not allowed to talk to them. And then we land, and it was like getting off of a time machine. I felt like I was back in the 1960s. And it was one of those countries that I'm so glad that I went there. It's definitely a paradise lost. And I mean, how fitting was it? We went to the most socialist communist country right before doing the most capitalistic thing in the world of selling a company. And the crazy thing about it, your cell phone doesn't work there too. So they didn't even know whether we got out, if we were okay or not. We just left and hoped that they would return someday.
That's so funny. So did you know that he was like, did they die? Like, were you aware of his concerns about your life when you left? Or were you just like, oh, I just got to go deal with this company sale?
I was more concerned about theirs. I mean, we were at least on the path home.
Sure.
They wanted to basically get every aspect of the experience. My favorite memory was, I think it was Neville's brother decided to start playing guitar and trying to earn money in Cuba, which theoretically they're not allowed to do. And he started making money. People would put money into this hat. And then we went to the best communist restaurant there was, which everything's the same price, and enjoyed a meal based on the money that he had earned in Cuba.
What a crazy story. Yeah, I don't know if I worked at an airline and someone came and bought money with cash. Like, I think I would just instantly assume something incredibly illegal or suspicious is going on. But what year was this? Was this like 2015?
I think it was like maybe 2013 or so. And it was one of those things where it was only illegal if you spend money in Cuba. Theoretically, it was against U.S. laws if you didn't spend money. Also, in Cuba, very nicely, they would not stamp your passport if you were nice to them. We had one person in our group, I think it was Noah Kagan, who decided to be like, oh, you're not going to stamp my passport. I already know how this all works. And they grabbed his passport and stamped it. And so he has that
Classic.
stamp in there and probably caused him some trouble later on.
That's fun. Love Noah. Good friends with him from some of the business we've done together. That's such a funny story. Okay, I have another clip, and we'll jump into some other fun stuff. But I think this one's maybe the most interesting.
When they went back, he created the subscription process company where you could sue anyone for $97 a month. He created like suing as a service, and it actually helped me a lot because I had this big problem where Amex misplaced 1 million of my points like 8 years ago. And this was when, airline points or Amex points were worth like a ton of money. And they replaced like over 1 million of my points. I could never get them to fix it. It was a clerical error on their side. They said, go to Starwood. They said, go to Amex. This back and forth circular thinking no one could solve the problem. So I tell John Arrow about this. He's like, hey, I have this company that's going to sue them. Let me try to handle it. Literally in 2 days, the head of American Express legal, the full head of the entire department, she calls me on my phone and was like, hey, you have a problem. How do I solve it? And I was like, just give me all my points back. The next day, all my points in my account. I'd been working on this for like over a year. And I called John and I was like, dude, what did you do? And he's like, oh, I just sent them a thing that said they got hacked. Like, clearly you messed up his points and placed him in someone else's account. So you clearly got hacked. And the number one thing that companies hate, credit card companies, is getting hacked. And he just solved it. And I remember thinking like, dude, this guy is like, he just thinks in different ways.
So tell us more about this story, because it sounds like you're some type of genius hacker for money, for hire type of, behind the scenes stuff. But like, was that a simple process for you, or did you have to do some deep work to figure that out for Neville?
Well, like Neville, I love doing these experiments. And so one of the companies that I started after I sold Neutral Mobile the first time, I kind of sold this company twice. We can get into that. I said, wow, I had access to this amazing team of lawyers, literally the best lawyers money can buy. It's so unfair that other people don't have access to that. Big companies do. And so if a company does something that isn't right, you're not really able to do much. It's not worth doing much. And so I said, well, what if you created a company that basically automated small claims lawsuits in the United States? There are a lot of pain. You have to go to the courthouse and do that. And so that's exactly what we did. Really small team of people. This is before AI. So everyone's manually filling out forms, delivering them to the courthouse, running them. And we were actually responsible for more lawsuits, our company in Texas, than any other company, because we were the ones filing these things. It was pretty hilarious. I mean, we had courts reaching out to us like, why, who are these people? But the crazy thing about it is most of the time, these companies, once they're caught and once they realize they weren't doing the right thing, they'll get in touch with that person and they'll want to make it right. And they'll want to settle it, or they'll realize, oh, we just didn't realize the issue. And so that was the case of what was going on with Neville. He was owed these points. These points should have been his points. He had tried. He's a smart guy. He's one of the smartest people that I know. And it's just American Express isn't going to take anyone seriously. And I've been an American Express user for many, many years. They're really good, but sometimes they get into an issue where they're just not going to deal with it. And so what I did is I helped them use the site, and we had somebody create all the paperwork. And I think initially we didn't get a response. And so what I did is I have a service that gives me the email address of everyone at a company. And I said, well, obviously, American Express, there must be something wrong here because they're normally a great company. So I think we sent out an email to every single employee at American Express with the subject line, possible data breach. Right. Obviously, there must be something wrong if Neville doesn't
Someone's
have
going to get that email. Yeah.
Right. And obviously, once people aren't going to really interrogate exactly what it means. But once enough people forward this to the CEO, the CTO, the CLO, it gets looked into. And American Express, to their credit, once they realize it, they did a good job, and they credited him the points. Some companies can be more difficult, but that was the whole spirit of that website.
That's really interesting. Now I'm wondering if Neville should have asked for like 2 or 3x of the number of points. Like, yeah, actually, because of the trouble, give me 5 million.
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, okay. So tell us more about Mutual Mobile. You've mentioned it a couple of times. Of course, that's one of the main businesses that is, what led to your wealth. But tell us more about it. What is Mutual Mobile? What did you do? And kind of where are you at now with that?
Kind of like how I met Neville when I was at the University of Texas. I met some other entrepreneurs, and we were entering in college when the iPhone was released. And it was this amazing moment. It was probably, for people that don't remember the iPhone being released well, it was like ChatGPT times 10, in my opinion, at that point. It was the device that was going to change the world. Everybody saw this. I don't think it was, we had a super unique enthusiasm about it, but myself and my co-founders, what we realized is that this was going to change every aspect of the world, from education to financial services to defense, you name it. And we said, we want to build iPhone apps, but we can only build so many. There's a shortage of people that can make these things. Let's try to amass and develop the company that is capable of helping the enterprise world create mobile applications. And so that's exactly what we did. We had the largest number of iOS engineers under one roof outside of Apple for several years. And just by having that scale, it meant that most of the Fortune 1000, when they wanted to get something made, they came to us. So it started with mobile, and then we parlayed that into tablet, into Internet of Things. We did stuff in the self-driving realm. We've done stuff in any type of new emerging tech. Before we sold the company, we started doing a lot in AI before ChatGPT was a household name. And so that they kind of gave me the launch pad to know what I was going to do next. But like I said, we sold the company twice. So in 2013, it was like the height of the mobile bubble is what I called it. We were doing close to $45 million a year. We were receiving revenue multiples on the valuation of the company. We were seeing like 2x revenue multiples, which is insane for a company in kind of we didn't think of ourselves as a services company. We thought of ourselves as a solution company, but still a 2x revenue multiple was pretty interesting. We decided that it probably made sense to run a process and sell the company. We were split on whether we should sell the whole company or part of it. I was of the belief, I was the CEO at the time and chairman, I was like, let's sell the whole thing. This is a really, really good deal. The fact that we're even entertaining $100 million valuations and that we've raised no money. I mean, this is a really, really magic moment. And we had companies ready to buy the whole thing. We ended up going with WPP, the large advertising conglomerate, great company, because they were willing to let us do a minority deal where we still stayed in control after we sold. And so that's exactly what we did. After we sold, I left as CEO. I went and flew my plane around the world, did interesting new companies, like things that let people sue anybody, and then, helped as a chairman, but I wasn't running it. And then about 5 years later, they asked me if I'd come back as CEO. And I said, okay, but on one condition, and that condition is that we sell the rest of the company. And so that's what
Wow.
I did. And we sold the rest of the company in 2023. And I just finished my earnout about a year ago or so. Now I'm looking at new things.
Okay. So 2013 was the initial partial acquisition. And walk us through some of the numbers behind that. What was the actual acquisition? How much also did you make from that acquisition?
So, I mean, we had no capital raised into the company. So a lot of times when there's venture deals, it's a situation where you're giving money back to the investors. There were 0 investors in Mutual Mobile. So we had five total people, and we decided, look, whoever wants to sell a portion of their stock can do so. And I decided to sell the majority of my stock at the time in that. And the valuation, I think it was around $70 million or so. And so it was a very good exit for me. It was one of the best decisions that I ever made. I'm really glad I did that then. And it was one of those things where we kind of got to look down the other alternative reality too. We got to keep running the company. When we ran the company for 10 years after that, which was incredible. We worked with hundreds of interesting companies. We, during the course of that, hired thousands of people. And it was a great journey. But, one of the things that I've come to realize through other exits too, is that you never regret selling. It's never happened to me. And I don't think I know anybody who's ever regretted selling a company. I've met many people who have regretted not selling a company though.
I've heard more of the latter as well. So you mentioned 5 of you who were actual shareholders. How many people were at the company at the time of the sale in 2013?
I think it was around 350 or so.
Okay, 350. So you made 70 million. What did you do with that money? I mean, that's a life-changing amount of money. What happened, the day it hits your account? What was that feeling like?
I think what's really interesting, like you think about the day before. I mean, theoretically, this money didn't come out of nowhere. You had this, but it was on paper, right? So it wasn't liquid. It's not like all of a sudden, you knew you had it, but you had 99% of your net worth locked up into what was an illiquid asset. And when you're going through a process selling a company, you oscillate between days when you think your company is worth $100 billion and when you think it's worth nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like this time period where you're really curious. I mean, I think that was one of the fascinating things about going through the process is you wanted to see where it ended up, because we had an offer for $100 million for the company. We went with less because we wanted flexibility on some of the terms. And so the day after the wires hit, you're thinking about your bank account balance, and it's literally like an order of magnitude higher than it was before, maybe 2 orders of magnitude. And so it changes your perspective on everything, right? If you used to think about something costing $100, it's like it costs $10 now. We were kind of going through that mindset. And I had been really fortunate that I had made a fair amount of money before through other businesses, but this was definitely, kind of an order of magnitude more. And the biggest thing I realized is, wow, this is a situation where I never need to work again in my life. You think about risk-free interest rates, even then when they were relatively on the low side, I mean, you can just bank interest. And so I didn't really do anything that differently after I sold. I think I bought the first Model S Tesla in Texas, which they weren't supposed to sell me. It's a long story, but they wasn't supposed to have it. But other than that,
why weren't they supposed to sell it? I'm interested.
Texas had this protectionist law. They've gotten way better, where you were not able to buy directly from the dealer. You had to go through another third-party dealer. So any of the cars in Tesla, you had to go to Colorado or something. I just showed up at the Tesla shop where it was a showroom. And I said, look, I want to buy this car right now. They made a call and they're like, look, we can't sell you this. We don't even have a way to give you like temp plates. I'm like, okay, I don't care. I don't need the plates.
Yeah, I just came from Cuba. I don't care about plates.
What they did, I did not ask them to do this. I did not tell them not to do it, but I didn't ask them to do this. They made me I think they made me like a fake California temporary bag or something and put it on the car. Maybe it was a real temporary. I don't know. But I did get pulled over. And the cops were thoroughly confused by the situation.
That is so funny. You did get pulled over. How soon after getting the car did you get pulled over?
A week later, and they're like looking at this plate and, like, oh, Californians are strange people. I guess this is how it works there.
That is so funny. Oh, man. Okay. So you mentioned you already had achieved some wealth prior to that acquisition. What was your net worth before the $70 million paycheck? And
it was like flirting, like liquid net worth. Liquid net worth was probably flirting with around $1 million before.
Okay.
It's all there.
So you weren't going from nothing to wealth, but 70x. And what was the pay structure of that exit? Was it all at once to hit your account 70, or was it a payout over some period of time?
The majority of it was upfront, and then there was an earnout component, but the vast majority of it was upfront. And I always encourage that. I mean, I think earnouts, fortunately, are really problematic. There's a thought they're going to keep things aligned, but in reality, they often don't, and they end up as somewhat of a mess. I've never, ever talked to anybody whose earnout went really well.
So that initial payout was, let's say, 55 million, 60 million?
It was a significant amount. I can't go into the exact amount because of an
That's
NDA,
okay.
but I can say the vast majority of there's none of the money went onto the balance sheet of the company. It was all
Okay.
secondary to us, and I took the lion's share of it.
Okay. So majority upfront, and you bought a Tesla. What did you do with the rest of the cash? Did you leave it into, index funds, or did you invest? Are you building new companies you mentioned? I mean, tell me more about what you did with that money.
All of the above. I mean, I think one of the things that's fascinating about money is it makes you more the person that you already were, in my opinion. Right. And so before that, I was investing. Before that, I was doing experiments. Before that, I was flying airplanes. And so it kind of turned up the rheostat switch on all of those in a big way. I think one of the great things about it is you could start to make riskier investments. It was possible to obviously not just do index funds. You could do things that were more exotic. You could get more into angel investing. I was working 100 hours a week before that. And all of a sudden I had this abundance of time. So I could take the airplane that I loved flying and go on further destinations. So I kind of turned up the rheostat switch on all of those things. I did a lot more investing. And one of the things that I found, the more investing that I do, I like it. And I think it's a great passive thing to do. That being said, I enjoy the most experimenting and starting new companies. I think that's the most fun. It maybe doesn't necessarily have the highest expected value as just investing, but it is something that I enjoy immensely. I mean, one of the things too is it allowed you to kind of get into areas where you didn't really necessarily have domain knowledge, but you wanted to learn more. Super into rocket ships and outer space, and just largely because of serendipity of knowing Neville and other people, I got invited into a very early round of SpaceX, and so got to kind of do that just because I wanted to go to see rocket launches. I didn't even think it was investment grade, but it leads to more serendipity. It lets you kind of flip the quarter more and more once you're not as afraid of losing.
Yeah. What's the best place you flew your plane during that period of time? You said you went to some fun places.
Probably the Lesser Antilles. So
Okay.
one of the extreme Eastern Caribbean was a blast.
Very cool.
This was before, a lot of the flying was before we really had electronic charts. I had an iPad, but I don't think it was that great at the time. And so you take off and not always know where you're going to land, which is kind of cool. And if you're a commercial plane, they'd never do that. But you can do that as a private pilot and just say, oh, wow, that runway looks amazing. Let's look it up. The distance is good. And there's this small little island with a beach, and that's about it, and a runway. You land there, and maybe there's a hotel room, maybe there's not, and then you fly somewhere else the next day.
And you're just, I mean, these are single engine planes, right? So what's the what's the distance that you can really go on
this
those?
is a Cirrus SR-22. You can do about 1,000 nautical miles without stopping.
Nice.
And
Okay.
right, a single engine. So if that thing stops, you're pulling the parachute with the plane. The plane has a giant parachute that it floats down.
I'm assuming you've never had to do that, but now I'm wondering. Okay. Let's hope that
You
never
only
happens.
use it once.
Yeah, exactly. That's a one and done type of thing. And then you mentioned some exotic investments.
Yeah.
You use the word exotic. Tell me what is the most exotic investment that you've made and why?
When I say exotic, I mean investments I probably wouldn't necessarily say are investment grade. I mean things like when friends that you admire a lot are starting a new company, you can do an angel investment into their company, or you get invited into some type of SPV where you really don't know if this is going to work out or not. When you have kind of more shots on goal, you're willing to take that chance. And most of those do not work. I don't think that's a sound strategy for people to just do lackadaisically. But because of some of them, and because of the power law, the ones that have worked have immensely paid for the ones that have not. And it also ends up getting more and more things, more great opportunities on your plate, the more of those that you do as well.
So when you're not spending money and flying and investing, where's the rest of the money sitting? Is it in mostly index funds, or do you have a financial advisor and wealth manager?
I'm really against kind of wealth managers and financial advisors by and large. I know there are some good ones out there, and there's some people that if they have a good relationship, I think that's great. My take is it should be your business to kind of understand your own personal finance and your own business. I've invested my own money since I was 13. My dad gave me access to a brokerage account. So I feel very comfortable doing that. Look, it's hard to bet against the United States. I love the S&P 500, SPY, Dow. I think there's these other companies like Apple that keep compounding over and over again, Google and Tesla. One of the great things about these companies is that if you buy and hold them, they're going to appreciate. And so I think there's companies that you don't sell them.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I've heard that a lot. I have a similar stance on wealth management. I think good for people who really just don't want to think about it at all. But if you want to really be involved in the numbers, I think there's good ones and there's bad ones. We'll keep it at that. Back to the story. You said you were hired back as a CEO of Mutual Mobile. Tell me what financially triggered that for them, and then for you, why accept the role if you're more financially free? Then you never need to make another dollar again, it sounded like. Why'd you go back?
I was definitely conflicted when it was presented to me. There's definitely a financial motive in that I still, even though I sold the vast majority of my stake in the company, I still had a significant amount of value that was locked up in this illiquid security. So there was a desire to kind of see that become something. And that was the motivation. I like to see things through and complete them. Also, the world had changed a lot. We had a lot of new emerging tech. I was curious to be back into that role. And it's fun to hold the reins of a company where you are managing hundreds of people. That was really thrilling. I had missed that. After I had sold the company, we literally went from 350 people to when I was doing my experiments, maybe I had 3 people again. So I wanted to put myself back into that perspective. The reason that I think they had asked me to come back is we sold at that first valuation at the top of the cycle. Again, businesses like ours don't normally trade for 2x revenue. There's something really special going on when that happens. And if you look at kind of your typical advertising agency, it trades for maybe 1 times AR at most. And a lot of times it's like something like 0.75 AR. So this was a special moment. The other reason that I wanted to come back is I felt like I owed it to the employees and to the team. I helped build this thing. I have responsibility for it, and I wanted to make sure everybody had a good outcome.
What was the valuation? Well, you mentioned it was 100 million, give or take, valuation, the first sale. What was it when you came back, and what was it when you left the second time?
Right. So the company, it didn't do poorly during that time, but it certainly didn't grow at the same rate. So you kind of had 2 compounding factors working against valuation. 1, growth had slowed a ton. And then 2, you ended up in a situation where the market began commoditizing, right? Whenever there's a new technology, there's tons of fragmentation. There's all of these new companies. Everybody's starting something. And then inevitably, consolidation hits. There's acquisitions and prices go back to the baseline and things commoditize. We're starting to see this in AI already. And so while we were kind of the new novel company back in 2013, when I returned in 2018, or maybe 2020, 2020, I guess, things had changed and we weren't trading at the same multiples. It was a much more established business area. And so when we started running a process and looking at buyers, before everybody was a potential buyer. I mean, we had term sheets, SAP, from Deloitte, from Accenture, you kind of name it. And now we were looking at more traditional IT services companies, a lot of international ones. And these were companies that weren't really strategics in the same way that the first round were.
Okay. So you joined the second time. That was 2019, you said?
I'm really thinking when that was. Maybe it was 2018.
2018. It stayed for 5 years, so 2023.
It took a lot longer. It took a lot longer than I thought.
Okay. How long did you think it would take?
I thought we could probably do it in a year. And there was a lot of things. I mean, we could have. You could always sell. You can always sell. But if you want to get what you think is a good price, it makes sense to do things in the business. So I ended up, rather than just putting on the CEO for sale hat, I ended up putting on the CEO, let's get our hands dirty. Let's figure out how to get this business growing again. It was a lot of fun. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. I think it was more fun in some ways the second time, surprisingly, because you didn't have the same risk profile.
You say you had less to lose. You already won. Yeah.
Exactly. This was more like kind of a victory lap. It probably meant too that I didn't take it quite as seriously, but I still took it pretty seriously. It was just more fun. It was much more of a balance rather than a full on, this is the only thing I do.
And what was the second exit like? What were the numbers behind that, and what did you make personally?
So that one definitely is still under an NDA, but the valuation, it was a very good valuation for everybody involved. The great thing about it is we had an initial investor, WPP, bought shares. We made sure that they had a great outcome, especially considering where the business was at. Everybody who sold the second time was happy with it. And it was the right thing to do. I mean, if we had waited and not sold, I don't know, given what's going on with AI right now, I think we would have had to lay off hundreds of people.
That's rough. Yeah.
Right now, what you can do with some of these tools that are out there kind of makes Mutual Mobile and companies like it not as relevant. You need to change. There's going to be amazing new businesses, and I can talk about a little bit of some of the new things that I'm working on in the space. But I think the traditional companies that produce digital products, why do you need them now?
Yeah. Were you fiddling with some of these side projects during that second term as CEO, or was that like everything in one bucket type of role?
We could see where things were going with AI. So we were really fortunate that we got to do a lot within machine learning with computer vision. So even though LLMs weren't really the mainstay, we saw what was about to happen. Like we were like, wow, this is really powerful. It feels like there's an inflection point there. And so I knew I wanted to do something in AI even before ChatGPT came out. It was just kind of a happy coincidence. And I guess it was November of 2023 that ChatGPT was launched, that I was basically a free agent again.
And is that when Freedom GPT sort of came to life? Okay. Tell me more about Freedom GPT and how you started getting involved with AI and LLMs.
Yeah. Daniel, did you ever use AOL Instant Messenger growing up?
Oh, of course. I was tall kid, 1953.
That's a
Because I'm
niche.
tall. I'm 6'5", and
Yeah.
I basically stopped growing when I was 15. So you can do the
Also
math.
same. I remember using it too and thinking it was such a cool piece of software, and that's how you'd
Yeah.
stay with your friends. There was this one user on AOL Instant Messenger called Smarter Child, and it was this robot that you could talk to. When I was like 11 or 12, I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. It wasn't really AI. It was just a bunch of if-then statements, but you could ask a question and then Smarter Child would reply to you. And very quickly you'd ask something and it would say, that's not appropriate. I'm not going to answer it. And it was the first time a computer told me,
Yeah.
no,
Push back.
you can't do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You've controlled it. Like, who is this computer to tell me that?
Right.
And that was 11 or 12-year-old John. And then I
Mhm.
didn't feel that way again until November of 2023 when I first started using ChatGPT. I was so excited about this. I had been following what OpenAI was doing, and first couple inferences go great. And then all of a sudden, I asked something pretty innocuous. I don't remember what it was, but it was not that crazy. And it tells me I'm not going to answer it. It's like,
Hmm.
wow, this super powerful technology is deciding what I can and can't ask a computer. That doesn't seem right. So immediately I knew with my co-founder Tarun from Mutual Mobile, we wanted to start a company that let people use AI without needing to get permission. And we knew there was going to be a bunch of models that were going to be coming out. A lot of them were going to be relatively open and uncensored. Some were going to be proprietary, like OpenAI's. And we said, let's just create the place where everybody can go and use whatever AI is objectively best for what they're trying to do. Maybe you're trying to ask a math question, and then subjectively best. You and I could ask
Mhm.
the same question about something, and there might be a different model that's better for us just based on our history of using it. And that's what we wanted to create. And we had very quickly after launch, we had a couple million people using the platform. And it's been a really fun business. I think it's something where it's a rising tide situation. As there's new models that get released, we put them up there, and so it's one of the first ways that people use a lot of the new AI products.
Yeah, when you think of new companies now, I'm curious. We have something called the threshold number on MoneyWise, and it's
Mm.
the number that you're attaining for before you feel like you've made it. You don't need to make another dollar for the rest of your life. Is Freedom GPT and some of these other companies, the investments you're making, is it to make more money? And if so, I guess
Hmm.
what amount of net worth are you attaining for? Or if not, what was that number when you did finally reach it?
Might be use money as a proxy, right? It's like crude oil or something. It allows you to do more of what you already want to do. The test that I look at is what Naval Ravikant says. He says, in life, or the best intelligence says, are you getting what you want out of life? And I view money as kind of a symptom, a side effect of doing other things with high impact. It's very important. It's fun to make in its own right. But the bigger thing is, are you kind of achieving the impact that you're going to achieve? I'm of the belief that we're of this phase that there's going to be massive abundance, like what Elon's saying with the robots coming with Optimus, that we're going to have to look for other ways to derive meaning in the near
Mm,
future. Freedom
work
GPT,
optional future, right?
yeah, for sure. I think it's going to be something where if you have access like to scarce resources that you previously had to give money to create, what's the point if you can get as much of that as you want? There are going to be things that are still require money, land, and probably certain works of art and names and different things like that. But I think it's maybe more of a Maslow's hierarchy of needs question. Early on, when you're starting a company, it comes down to the whole ramen profitability thing, right? Let's create enough money so that you're at least self-sustainable. You can feed yourself, you can pay your employees. Eventually, as you kind of transcend that ladder and get up to the more self-actualization side of it, it's more, are you getting out of life what you really want? And so there was a moment, I think, after Mutual Mobile where I realized I didn't need to work again. And I kind of tried not working. And I realized I just loved building too much. And so Freedom GPT and some of the other projects that I have going on now are side effects of that.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I think that's a certain like a philosophy or worldview of
Yeah.
money in general. When you think about like the philosophy or the principles behind Freedom GPT and even the direction of some of the businesses and investments you're making now, walk me through how you view some of this like open world freedom, even Freedom GPT, the naming nomenclature of it obviously has a connotation. Why? I guess why does it matter to you for people to have access to that that's unfiltered?
Going back to Quebec, the company we talked about where I let anybody sue a business. This was this really leveling force where people didn't have access to attorneys. And I saw kind of the good that can come out of that. There was this whole digital digital divide early on with who had access to the web and who didn't. There was another kind of version of this with who had access to banking and not having banking. I saw the same thing playing out again with AI, where there was going to be a class of people that had access to artificial intelligence, the top tier, and then there was going to be a people that didn't, or maybe were taking advantage by it. And so I saw this call, this real need. Let's have that place where we make sure that people aren't left behind by it. Already, if you're looking with what Anthropic's doing, I'm an investor in Anthropic, great company, but it just boggled my mind now. They're asking you to submit photo ID verification before you can use some of their models, which is, who are they to say? If you don't need to show an ID to vote, why all of a sudden you need to show an ID to use an AI model? I don't want to get into politics, but it's just mind-boggling to me that they're the ones that get to police that. And you can come up with some reasons why. I understand some of the downfalls. I do think AI needs to be regulated, but I was sure of it that things like Anthropic were doing were going to become the norm rather than the exception. So we want to make that area where people are not left behind and can always use the AI model that's best for them.
No, that's an interesting worldview for sure. And I think it's likely, to your point earlier, it's going to be in an ever-evolving worldview as technology continues to kind of force opinions on the matter. Back to money just briefly, what's your current net worth, liquid and illiquid, and what does your actual personal spending look like every month?
It's well into the eight figures. The vast majority of it is liquid in stocks. There are some private things that are out there that are not liquid now, but will likely be liquid very, very, very soon. But most
like 75, give or take, 80 liquid.
It's probably closer to 65%. I think is liquid.
65. Right, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I think that's like kind of like the right mix for me. Like I don't feel like any of your investments should give you heart palpitations or keep you up at night. And my goal with investing is it should sustain whatever your spend is in life. You should always kind of a given quarter, maybe not a given month because there are market fluctuations, but on a given quarter, ideally your net worth steadily increases even without, you needing to be dependent on an income source. I mean, it's great to have diversified income sources. I think that's really, really important. But ideally, your investments are at a point where no matter what you do, your net worth is kind of continually increasing.
Okay. And so well into the eight figures, we're talking, closer to 100 or closer to 50?
Somewhere in between that.
Somewhere in between that. Well, let's call it 75 for the sake of the conversation.
So well into the eight figures, but on the south side of 50 currently.
On the south side of, okay, cool. No, that's helpful. And 65% of that then in liquid assets.
Stocks, basically, yeah.
Okay. What does your personal spending look like? What do you actually spend your money on outside of flying? You fly every week, right? Give or take?
I fly either myself or I'm being flown, but pretty much every week. Yeah.
Okay. Do you fly private or is it all commercial or in your own plane?
When it makes sense to fly private, I will. I think it's something where when there's an experiential need behind it or when there's like a real work need, maybe there's two cities that aren't connected. But I like to try to fly myself places. I feel like that's what makes me a better pilot. I do want to switch planes to more capable planes soon. So I'm flying once a week, either myself or by somebody.
Okay.
The way I think about spending is something that I've thought a lot about this. Like the thing to be careful with spending generally isn't overindulging. Maybe private air travel is the exception to that. But if you think about spending in general, like if you went out and bought ton of different things. You went shopping, you had kind of this extravagant vacation or something, you come back, you're probably not going to lose money doing that. There's a lot of people that do that and they get tired of it. I think Paul Graham kind of came up with this idea, like the way that you lose money is when things kind of trick you into thinking they're investments and they're not, right? So like if you spent years laboring over a business, throwing capital into it and it keeps losing money, that's what you need to be more careful of than just like overindulging. It's like if you went out and ate a bunch of ice cream and pizza one night, you're probably not going to feel like doing that the next day. You kind of got enough of that out of your system. Whereas if you think you're doing something that is an investment that's not, that's what gets you into trouble. So I think as it relates to kind of personal spend, I don't feel like that's something I'm less careful in watching. I think most of my personal spend right now is what I would call discretionary legal, where there's different matters that I'm in where it makes sense for me to spend money on that. And it's probably like $20,000 to $30,000 a month in that.
Okay. And that includes cost of living, do you own or do you rent?
Oh, that's just legal.
That's just legal. Okay. So let's include then the home you live in. It sounds like you have a spot in New York and in Austin. Is that it, or do you have other real estate?
Two places. I have a condo that I own in Austin without a mortgage. It's like about $2 million. And then that's I have HOA expenses, tax expenses. That's probably, and they have room service there. It's at the W Hotel. So that's a little dangerous. You end up using that.
How much do you use that? Is like every day type of thing or a couple times a week?
More than you think. Yeah. More than you think.
Yeah. I mean,
Yes.
maybe not more than I think. If I lived there, I'd probably use it every day because I hate making my own food. I'm like a 2-year-old in that sense.
So
It is very convenient.
So my residence in Austin's probably like around $10,000 a month all in if you take all the HOA and taxes and other expenses. And then I have a place here in New York that I'm in right now, and I rent this place, and that's like $11,000 a month. So that's kind of
So 10 plus 11 plus about 30, which is the discretionary. And then the fun stuff. I mean, the plane, what does it cost to upkeep the plane and fly, once a week, give or take?
Plane's interesting because there's fixed expenses and there's variable expenses, right? So this plane, most of the expense for a plane is like if it just sits there every year, a plane needs to have an annual inspection where they take it completely apart and put it back together, or nearly so. So it doesn't matter if you fly 1 hour or several hundred hours, they're doing that, right? And then you have the variable expenses, which are the fuel and the time on the engine. Most of the expense for a plane on variable isn't really the fuel, it's the wear and tear you put on the engine. So a lot of people think of the economics as having an engine reserve program for the aircraft, but the plane itself is not that crazy. I would say all in on the plane, fixed variable expenses probably comes out to somewhere like maybe $7,000 a month.
Okay. So you're looking at like, 50 to 65,000 a month in overall spending.
Right. I'm thinking of just other things like there's
what do you do for fun? Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, it sounds like you fly for fun, but
it's funny. I've never really been too into cars, but I ended up getting a lot more cars because I'd fly to these small little airports, and some of them would have cars, but a lot of the really small ones do not have any transportation. If you're somewhere really remote, like Marfa, the next closest rental car could be like a couple 100 miles away. And so I started putting small cars, or not small cars, just kind of cheap cars at a bunch of these little airports in Texas. And then I let other pilots use them and rent them out. It was called VFR car.
That's very cool.
It worked really, really well. I actually, up until recently, I did this. Then I started realizing, okay, the Tesla robotaxi thing's almost here. We're not going to need these anymore. So I just got rid of all of those cars. I only have 2 cars now.
How many did you have at the top?
I think we had maybe 7 or 8.
Okay. So it wasn't really a business. It was more of like you had these cars for you and you might as well make money on them.
Might as well just let more to let other pilots do because they'd fly somewhere really cool and like, how do I get around? There's no taxi. There's no Uber.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. Yeah.
Do
you manage all the logistics of this yourself, or do you have like a chief of staff or a personal assistant?
I have an assistant that I use for this, but I try to involve kind of my friends that are interested in. My brother Zach, also my younger brother, who's interested in similar things, and we kind of work together on a lot of these projects.
Okay. That's very cool. I've heard, a number of times through this conversation, you speak a lot more, I would say intentionally, about the way you've presented yourself as, someone with wealth, someone who's achieved great success in business, and almost like not really deferring happiness before a future milestone, which I really appreciate about you. Tell me, are you still chasing something else, or are you happy in life, feel like you've made it, and now just keeping yourself busy?
I'm excited. I'm excited about this next phase. I have a family office called Age of AI, and I think this is going to be the most significant time in human history. I definitely want to be a part of ushering that in. I mean, it is insanely amazing that you can have an idea now and in 5 minutes have a piece of software. Have you tried it? It's incredible.
Which one?
Have you tried like Cloud Code or
all of them? Yeah, I pay for 5 different tools personally, and then in my full-time role, I have another 10 different tools that I use at the enterprise level. So yes, I was up late last night. My wife and both kids were asleep. And from 9:45 p.m. until 1 a.m., I was just building skills in Claude. Cool. Because I got lost and deep into the rabbit hole, and I was like, all right, well, here we are. It's 1 a.m. time to go to bed, but I just built some fun stuff.
That is so awesome that you did that. I love that you did that. I was doing the same right before we jumped on.
It's a mind-blowing world. I mean, and I feel like, you and I were talking about it. It's like, oh yeah, I just did that last night. But still, there's such a gap, a humongous gap, where I go out into the world for coffee or I get lunch with someone, and it's like, most people in the grand scheme of things still, Austin and New York, a little different, but most people like in a suburb just don't even have the first idea about what's happening in tech right now.
It's going to be a COVID level difference in the world this time next year.
Yeah. And I think it's already happening. I mean, to many of the points that you've made. Well, John, this has been a really fun episode. Neville said something to the effect of, I think John's the most interesting man in the world. And I agree. Like you are you really an interesting person. I think anyone that has a plane in a hangar that can just like leave and go wherever they want, whenever they want, like that already puts you in sort of a category of your own. But I think just the way that you've built successful companies and now you're, tinkering with AI at a pretty grand level. It's cool, man. I appreciate you sharing some of your thoughts with us. Do you have any like specific business ideas right now? And we can kind of end with this and bring the plane in for a landing, pun intended. Any business ideas that you want to start that you haven't started yet?
Every week now that it's so easy to create software, I'm starting. Because right before we jumped on, I was playing with this idea. How can you prompt an AI to go make money for you? I think that's pretty interesting. I mean, obviously,
Tell me when you figure that one out and
I
DM
think
me
we did.
the answer.
Um,
Okay.
well, here's one thing that's interesting. I hope it's okay to involve you a little bit in the show. I created this thing right before with Zach, my brother. It's called otu.net. And
Okay.
you can type in anybody's name and it just shows them unclaimed money. I typed in your name, Daniel. It looks like
Okay.
you got $465. You just need to fill out one form of money that's owed to you and they'll send you a check. And then
Ode to the like TO or the number?
TO, yes. I think this
Ode
is
to you.net.
right. I see that you have some crypto services in, I think it's Wyoming, has over $100. I won't say how much. And then you got something in Illinois. I don't know if that's true or not, something that PayPal is holding. I just pulled up a full report. I mean, how crazy is that? I just was doing it on some of my friends too. It's all kind of similar things. And then it shows you, based on what it could learn about you, class action lawsuits that you might be entitled to collect on as
Oh,
well.
I'm sure there are so many
And
of
there's
them.
so many, right? I mean, that's what's amazing. You can just prompt an AI now and have it go generate revenue for you. So I love those types of ideas. I think that's going to be the Rubicon moment. At some point, rather than creating a piece of software, and I'll send you the report, but rather than creating a piece of the software, you're literally going to be able to tell an AI, go produce this outcome, and it will just give you the outcome.
Now I'm seeing the 483 or something, but I actually see $2,100. I see some from
Let me send you this
AT&T,
report.
MetLife, Bank of America,
Yeah. I see a Merrill Lynch one too.
Merrill Lynch. I wonder why I have
Well, no,
money that
I'll send you this report and all that.
please. That's cool. See, I think we're already seeing it, but there will be so many one-man shop billionaires created in the next 5 years. And I think more wealth created in the next 5 years than the last 25 combined. That's my opinion. I loosely hold it because so much changes so fast, but I think we're at the precipice of something that's never happened before in history of technology. So it's very exciting.
What an amazing time to be alive, and we get to usher
What an
that.
amazing time. Yes, absolutely. John, this has been such a good episode. I really appreciate you coming on MoneyWise and hope you take care. I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Daniel. It's been a blast.